Hey everybody, welcome back to day 2 of Breakthrough Week. I am so excited and I'm just gonna pop my phone ready because I learned yesterday that the comments don't always like to pop up in real time. And so this way I can make sure I'm chatting with you the whole time. So if you're here, say hello. I hope everybody is surviving the deep freeze because I know that a lot of you are without power and like power is just coming back on. So I hope that everybody is staying warm. So if you're here, say hello. Welcome back. I'm excited. Today we're talking about one of my favorite icons, and that is RBG. So tell me, how did the homework go for you yesterday? Hey, Teresa. Good to see you. Oh, my comments are working. Yay. Oh, my goodness. It's like a perfect day. Hi, Brenda. This is fantastic. I have comments today. I feel like a whole new person. Hey, Margot. Good to see you. Awesome. Okay. So if you have not, Luisana, did I say your name correctly? I hope I said that correctly. What a beautiful name. Hello. Thank you for joining. The comments from yesterday, people. If you have not had a chance to go back and read the day 1 comments from the homework, like if you just need like a dose of inspiration for just like any time, like just go read the comments. They are so good. Oh my goodness, they are so good. Oh, look at all these people. Hi, is it Kyle or Kylie? I know another girl named Kyle. So I didn't know if the E was silent. Hi, Sarah. Jeannie, Kelsey, Brittany, hello. Awesome. I'm so glad my comments are working. Yay. All right. So today we're going to talk about, yay, I said it right. Thank you. I'm so glad you're here. Advocacy. So I will draw the winner. I have everybody's names in here. This is my magic winning bucket. I'll draw the winner here in a little bit. But we're going to talk about advocacy because I think that advocacy is, and I'll be bold in saying this, tell me if you guys agree, I think it is going to be one of the must-have traits of modern leaders. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. Hey, Robin. Hi, Ellie. Hi, Denise. I think advocacy is going to be key. And here's why. I think sometimes we get stuck in this mindset of scarcity. Like, there's only enough room for me, or I'm going to be a victim of someone else's success. And I've been talking actually with a lot of women leaders, especially women leaders who are overseeing like women's leadership groups, employee resource groups. And what they're saying is sometimes that there's so few positions at the top that are women that we think that like if someone else gets a position, then there's no room for us. And I admit that like one of the things that I have to work on the most is like scarcity thinking that like I'm a victim of someone else's success, or just because somebody else is talking about it, I can't talk about it. There's not room for me. And I think the other thing that's part of this is the scarcity mindset is the thought that if I speak up, maybe somebody will take my idea. I don't know if you guys have ever thought about this. Do you guys see this? Or have you ever felt this? Like I'm feeling, or am I just the weirdo, right? That's just scared that like maybe there's not enough room, or somebody else has taken the position, so there's not enough room for me, or if I, speak my idea, somebody will take it. But I think that really comes from like a scarcity mindset. And, the thought that there's just only so much. But I think that one of the most valuable mindset shifts that we can make for like this new world of leadership and advocacy is recognizing that it's not somebody taking our idea, our position, or whatever is the problem. That's not the problem at all. The problem is actually obscurity. Like this world is so noisy. It's so noisy. And I mean, it's noisy on social media with everything going on. We're all like half at work, half home. We're all home. I mean, there's all these things, right? It's just noisy. That I think that obscurity is our problem. And what I mean by that is the world is so noisy that it's really hard to get heard. So that's why I think that advocacy is such an important value. But advocacy is hard. So like I was telling you guys yesterday, I was in that meeting with, in the great conference room with all the people, and all the ones that were talking were men. And, I just kind of had this thing like, why aren't women talking? Oh, Kelli, you should be the one. But I didn't go back in that room and immediately start advocating. I had like all my own junk to work through. So I'm curious. I want you guys to put in the chat, what gets in the way of you advocating for what you want or for you asking for what you want? What gets in the way? Because I know for me, it was the thought like, oh my gosh, who am I to speak up? Why do I have to be the one? My ideas aren't good enough yet. I don't think I have enough experience. Who wants to hear from me? What if people think this is stupid? And so I had like all of this chatter. And so I'm just curious, what comes up for you guys when you think about advocating for something, asking for something, sharing an idea, put yourself out there. In that moment, like what's that thing that holds you back? Because I think sometimes we kind of get caught up in your head. Yeah, so Brenda says my own head. We're going to talk about that a lot tomorrow. Not being heard. That's a good one. I don't realize what I want until I say it out loud. Natalie, I know that's a thing, right? Perception, that's a great one. Lack of self-confidence. Worried I'll get a no. And so Ellie, I would ask you, why would it be so bad if you got a no? Because I think sometimes we're worried that they're going to say no, but we've attached meaning to that no. Questioning myself, fear of failure, too opinionated already, never. I don't want to be a bother. Absolutely. These are all good ones. I don't want to appear like I'm the stupid one in the group. I might sound dumb. Oh, yes, absolutely. Selfish. So there's all of these reasons. Totally. And that's really what kept me from speaking up. And if I'm being honest, when I started my business, this was one of the most expensive mindsets that I have when I started my business. Because when you run a business, you don't get a for sure paycheck every 2 weeks like you get in corporate. And so I realized that my business, like I am not only my only salesperson, I'm my only marketing person, I'm my only finance person, like I'm the CFO, CMO, CEO, COO, right? And so, letting people know that I have a business takes advocacy. And so all of these thoughts and fears come in. And so one of the things that I started to pay attention to when I made this commitment that I was like, okay, I need to advocate in the rooms that matter. I needed to think about, well, who do I admire that always seems to speak up, and they do it in just like a way that I just feel like is so powerful and genuine and, just effective. So I want you to put in the chat, who is someone that you admire? You can know them or you don't have to know them. Who is someone that you admire for their advocacy and just like how they advocate? And if you want, when you put in the chat, when you put who, maybe start to think about what is it about them that you admire? What is it about them that you admire? It's because they do it in what way? So one of the things that I really started to think about is I really started to from day one, I was really thinking about how do I do this authentically, right? Because I'm an introvert. I'm never going to be the most talkative person in the room, right? I'm always going to think about all the things I should have said the minute I left the meeting. I don't know if that happens to you, but I'm always like, dang it. So I had to think about who is someone that is an introvert that I admire the way that they contribute. I loved, at that point, I found the book Quiet. It's the power of introverts in a world that won't stop talking. And her name is Susan Cain. So I was thinking about how she was an advocate on the TED stage. I started to look at leaders in my own organization that I knew were more on the introverted side, but I really admired how they put themselves out there. This is why I included the RBG quote today, because she says, fight for the things you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. And I think that's so important. In fact, I was reading the book Notorious RBG, and they were talking about how her dissents became so common because they were so thoughtful and deliberate. And the unique thing about her dissents was that it actually started a conversation instead of ending a conversation. And so I think that is really powerful when you think about, okay, in my advocacy, am I more, what is my motive versus what is my message? Because I think sometimes when we advocate from a place of motive, and motive is like from the ego, right? It's to prove right or wrong. It's to, it's out of judgment. It's out of, hate's a strong word. I don't like to use it, but it's out of like disdain, those sorts of things, right? Or are you advocating to share a message, and a message that inspires conversation? And I really admired that about her. It was thoughtful, it was deliberate, and it started a conversation. It didn't stop it. And so one of the things that I wanted to think about in my own advocacy was I wanted to not only make sure that I was advocating in a way that felt relevant, I wanted to make sure that it was strategic, like aligned either to a strategy or helping me accomplish a strategy. And I always wanted an element of curiosity in it, meaning I always felt like the people that I admired who made an impact did it in a way where they were asking thoughtful questions. Not like as in like, I'm going to sit here and play devil's advocate and just, try to prove you wrong sort of question. But they asked a genuine question in a way that sparked conversation versus halting conversation. And it got people to think in a different way. And in their own way, it kind of like proved their advocacy. So I kind of fell in love with question asking. And if you've ever worked with me, you guys know about my questions. You were like, you ask the best questions, you're stumping me. And I'm like, it just gets people thinking. So I want to read these. So CEO Lynn Miller, peace, leadership, everyone. She's capable of seeing what and who is in the room. Conversations are fuller. I love that. Michelle Obama, always poised and stands up for what she believes, authentically cares about people. I love that. Cy Wakeman, I dig her message when I stay in my lane and have empathy and keep my drama low. I think some of you know I used to work for Cy Wakeman. I met Cy Wakeman like 15 years ago, and I worked for her for 3 years. So I love this. So I want you to think about who is someone that you admire, and what are 3 things that you admire about them? I think that when we think about advocating for something that we want, one of my clients just does it better than anyone. She was actually getting ready to. So how many of you, drop in the chat, how many of you have women resource groups now at work? This is a new thing. So just tell me a yes if you guys have an employee resource group for women or women's leadership. So this was a new thing in her organization. And she was getting ready to go and present to her leader and then like a couple level of leaders up, okay, about not only, why they should have this employee resource group, but she was actually going to be presenting the agenda at this employee resource group. And so she was just so nervous. You just get into that thing where it's like, what are people going to think? Oh my gosh, what they question me, what they think this is stupid, all the things, right? So you guys just talked about all the stuff that goes on in your head. And so I asked her, I said, well, who's someone that you admire? And what are 3 words that describe why you admire their advocacy at work or their leadership? And so she wrote those down, and I said, I want you, and this is in your workbook on page 4, it's bonus points. I want you to just write about advocating for your women's leadership group and advocating for the programs that you believe in, not only as if you use those 3 adjectives, but I want you to write about the whole experience showing up as your truest, most confident self. Like, how are you going to walk in the room? What are you going to wear? What are you going to say? How are you going to handle objections? How are you going to show up? I think her 3 words were like confident, encouraging, and I think she said bold, maybe. I don't remember what her exact 3 words were. So she wrote about herself walking in, embodying these 3 words and how she presented. And she just wrote in her scratch paper exactly how she showed up, what she said, how she presented, how she overcame objections, and how she walked through this whole thing. And this is the coolest thing. She wrote me and she's like, Kelli, she's like, not only did everybody buy into what we wanted to do, but they accepted our agenda. And my confidence was so noticeable that the CEO said something after the meeting to her leader. So the reason why I want you guys to think about this is I think sometimes we get so caught up in how other people are going to perceive us. Like we just get in our heads, right? And we get really self-focused. Oh my gosh, am I ready for this? Am I smart enough for this? What will people think? What about my idea? What if I come across dumb? That we actually become selfish in this pursuit instead of like turning the attention over to the audience and asking ourselves, well, how do I want my audience to feel? So I give a lot of keynote speeches, and now a lot of that's on Zoom. but I get really, really nervous before these events. And I always be like the day before the event, even before I do things like this, I go into my journal and I write about how I want the experience to go. I write about the 3 words that are important to me. Like, what are my advocacy values today? And, to get out of my own head, I'm like, well, how do I want the people to feel that I'm talking to? And sometimes just that switch of reference just gets all the nerves and the attention off of me. And it like focuses that there's like a whole other person or sometimes 100 other people in this conversation. So that's my homework for you guys to think about. And I think that advocacy is so important. And I wrote down some notes. I want to make sure that I get them to all of you, because I believe that not asking, not speaking up is one of the most expensive mindsets, because it costs us in our peace, in terms of, things that we settle for. It costs us in our potential and the things that we don't ask for. And it ultimately costs us in our paycheck. I had another client that I met with last week who, and I'm sure this has happened to all of you, where her scope of work at work got really big, but she didn't get a raise. Does that happen to you guys? They start adding on more stuff, but they don't give you more money. I've been in HR. I've been on the receiving end of that. And we had this exact same conversation. This is no joke, knew she was being paid like 75 grand less than what market value was. I mean, we're talking huge, right? And her scope of work was huge. And she wasn't saying anything. And so she wrote me back and she's like, Kelli, she's like, after our conversation, I finally went in and the conversation was so uncomfortable, but I advocated not only for the roles that I wanted to keep, but for the money that I knew I could, that I was worth, and all the things that I could contribute to the organization. And it was so nerve-wracking, but I felt so good. It felt like freedom. And at the end of the day, when you advocate in alignment with your values, it should always feel like freedom and not like fear. Yes, you're going to be nervous, but at the end of the day, when you're advocating in alignment with your values, it should always feel. So I want to read some of these comments. So guys, what questions do you have about advocacy? Because advocating is difficult, right? It requires you to take a stand. I know last week, I've really been working on my own advocacy. And I wrote the Nebraska State Legislature, because there's a bill in the Nebraska State Legislature that bans asking salary history on resumes, because they say that it perpetuates the cycle of underpayment, especially because women tend to get paid about 20% less than men. And for women of color, it's even less. And so by not asking for salary history, you're not basing future offers on past salary. And let's be honest, I've been in HR and I've been a hiring manager. Your past salary doesn't correlate to your ability to be successful. So anyhow, I wrote in and then I made a video about it. And so advocacy feels scary, right? Because, oh my gosh, what are people going to think when they say this? Are they going to think I'm done? I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm on the internet. Am I going to get hate mail? You worry about these things. But at the end of that, it felt freeing. So it doesn't mean that I'm not nervous. It just means that what I'm about to say is so important and so in line with my values that what's worth speaking up for anyhow. So I want to, all of you have some women's groups. Yes, yes, yes. This is amazing. So on page 8 of your workbook, there's some stats in there. So for those of you who are thinking of advocating for a women's group in your organization, hopefully there's some stats that can help you out. And I know I've been partnering with a ton of women's ERGs this year, doing presentations and training and all those sorts of things. And it's so much fun. I feel much more confident advocating for others, but I have a hard time for myself. Yes, right? So I want you to notice, what is it about advocating for others, Sarah, that feels easy? Like, why do you do that? Like, what values are you honoring when you're advocating for others? And how can you turn that back towards yourself? And you might say to yourself, like, well, I advocate for others because it feels empowering, helpful, and kind. Okay, I'm just throwing those out there. So how can you turn that back to yourself and say, how can I stand up for myself today that feels empowering, helpful, and kind? What would that look like for you? Peggy, I'm the only female director, and of all the male directors make 25% more than I do. In fact, 2 male managers make more than 20. Okay, so Peggy, what's your plan? Besides, as we go through this week, I'm going to have more assignments for you. These just build. So Peggy, I want you to start thinking about what advocacy could look like for you, because I've been in that situation, and I've been in HR, I've been on the receiving end of that situation. And if you could think about what your 3 advocacy values are, what would those be? How do you want to advocate for yourself? And what would that look like? And this is, I hate to say this, but this happens. You know, I actually had a client who found out she was being underpaid amongst some of her male peers. And, you know, when we kind of got down to it, one of the things that she told me, she goes, Kelli, I just feel like I shouldn't have to ask. And I think that that is such a common thing where it's like, oh, I shouldn't have to ask. And you're right, you shouldn't have to. And there are times in our career where we find out that this is an issue, and so we are compelled to ask. And one of the things I told her, and one of the things I'll tell you, Peggy, is that you're not just asking for yourself, you are asking for every other woman who will follow behind you. You are asking for every other woman that will come into that organization. When one of my clients followed up with me last week, one of the conversations we had when she went to HR, and I know there's some of you in here in HR, that said, I'm not just advocating for myself, but when I bring awareness to my own pay discrepancy and asking thoughtful questions, just going back to RBG, it forces conversations in the organization about salary to begin and not end. So Peggy, I want you to think about, and Sarah, you know, advocating for others, this kind of goes hand in hand. What conversation could you be starting for others because you're willing to start it for yourself? And just think about what that could do for you. Okay, how do you know when you've reached the end of advocating, if that makes sense? When you advocate and don't get any outcome, so you need to make a different decision. When is the fight enough? Great. I would always notice where you are in alignment with your values and where you are forcing something versus advancing something. Do you feel the difference between that? And I think some of it's just an ego thing, right? In what ways am I forcing something? And in what ways am I advancing something? Because when I'm forcing something, it's either out of values alignment for me or it's out of values alignment for my employer. And if you and your employer have different values, like I shared this yesterday, it doesn't matter how awesome that organization is. You might find that it's a struggle for you to continue to find long-term work there. For example, if you value creativity and innovation and you work for a highly regulated organization that wants to go through 20 steps of red tape, it might be an ongoing struggle for you. If you value diversity and lots of women at the top and you work for an organization who is 95% male run and they don't have intentions of changing that, it might be a struggle for you. Yes, Natalie, the feelings. Okay. So I think it's just, noticing, am I forcing or am I advancing? And just noticing the difference of what that feels like. And at the end of the day, trust your intuition. Your body is trustworthy. I tell this to my clients all the time. We've all been taught that we, as women, we shouldn't trust our bodies. Too fat, too thin, too skinny, too tall, dress like this, dress like that. Your body is trustworthy and your still small voice knows her shit. And so just listen to that still small voice. So Lynette says, I had to leave my last job because they violated my personal core values. I've had to leave a job for that reasons too. Not because it was bad per se, but just because the structure in which things were set up wasn't going to work for my personality and what I wanted at work. What if your advocating goes wrong? Now it looks selfish instead. How do you rebound? I think one of the best things that you can do that I'm going to talk about somebody that I admire. I admire people, and I had a leader who was really good at this, who could sense intuitively when maybe something that they were pushing, something that they were working towards just didn't turn out as planned, or they overstepped something. They just owned up to it. And I hope that that's something that actually I've had to do with a client once. One time, to be honest, Ashley, I think I just kind of was pushing a client a little bit too hard on something. And when I hung up the call, I just didn't feel good. I was like, oh shit. I was like, I really just think I just kind of just asked one too many questions instead of just allowing this person the space and time to process. And so I actually reached back out to her 2 days later, and I just said it, Ashley, I said, you know what? I'm not feeling good about how we left the conversation yesterday. I said, I feel like in the spirit of growth, I hope my intentions were pure in the spirit of helping you reach your goals. I feel like maybe I was pushing just a little too far instead of just holding space for you. And we actually had a really awesome conversation about that. And so, you know, I think that one of the awesome things about advocacy is it still builds on your authenticity and empathy as a human being. And I think there's a huge balancing act between, you know, being an advocate, yes, and also noticing where you're like, oh, you know, I may have pushed that one a little too far. And I think that there's just a lot of humility by just reaching out to that person or that group and just saying, you know what, the way that I approached this yesterday, after I gave it some thought, it didn't send the message I was hoping to send. And so I'm hoping that we can talk about it again today. So we're not always going to get it right. So Brene Brown has this quote that she says, and I absolutely love it. And she says, oh shoot, it's not about being right. It's about getting it right. So when I think about advocacy, that's been really huge for me is I promise you all that at some point in your advocacy as a leader, you won't get it right. You won't. And that's scary for perfectionists. But I want you to focus more on getting it right than being right, you know, and working hard and, you know, using humility and apology and moving forward and learning and all of those things so that you are constantly working on getting it right with the people around you. So I hope that helps. All right. So let's draw the winner from yesterday. There were so many. Oh my goodness. So again, if you have not read, oh, and Brene Brown is an Enneagram 1, Ellie. So for all you Enneagram 1s out there. Okay, so the chat thread yesterday is the bomb. And so if you ever need a dose of inspiration, please go read it. So this person is winning Michelle Obama's True Voice Journal. So this is the companion journal that goes along with her book, Becoming. And you don't need to have read the book, Becoming, for this to make sense. This journal is, I have it up my, okay, I wish I had it. It is amazing because it's got not only her quotes in there, but it's like a guided journal prompt every single day to help you tap into your true voice, your authenticity, the things you love, all the things we talked about yesterday. So this person is going to get the copy of that journal, and it is Michaela Wilburn. So I don't know if you're on here today, but I will tag you, and then you can PM me your address so I can send you the journal. So yay, Michaela. And so she had a wonderful, all of you had wonderful contributions to read. So Margot, I love all these books you're referencing. Can you provide a resource list, books and podcasts? Yes, I will comment on this thread. So thank you all for joining me. So your challenge today, page 4 of your workbook, I want you to write your 3 advocacy values. And I walked you through all these things today, right, in our conversation. So the homework on the side. So think about when you advocate for the things that you want, what are 3 words that describe how you want to advocate? Because remember, like RBG says, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. How you say it is so important on are you thwarting the conversation or starting the conversation. So yay, Michaela, you're here. Perfect. Okay, so the homework posts will be up, the day 2 homework post. You're going to post your 3 advocacy values, do your homework, and be ready because you know I'm going to make you act on these. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and I am so excited to see you tomorrow. I'll post a resource list, and if you guys have any questions, you can always email me or send me a message, and I will see you tomorrow.